Much for Sheila for inviting, and for the whole center for inviting me to give some teachings for Shantideva Center. I feel very honored. Shantideva Center is at the moment very far away from me, being in India. So for me, I'm already at 8 o'clock in the evening and you just started your day. So I find that quite fascinating every time that happens. So we're going to do some teachings on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and especially on the aspect of impermanence. But before we start, I would like us to set up a good motivation. You know, we are a Mahayana center. And within the Mahayana, we all know that the motivation and the dedication are the 2 main aspects of a session. Everything that we do in between is not so important, they say. But if we have a very good motivation, then whatever we are doing will become a cause for our own enlightenment. It will become a cause for our development of our full potential of wisdom and compassion. And before I'll help you with setting up a motivation. So if there's anything that is not clear, please put it in the chat and I will sometimes look at it. And sometimes in my teachings, and I'm not sure if that happens today, I will ask something, you know, that I say, what do you think? Or how does that work for you? And then I invite you to put something in the chat, right? So then feel free to put something in it. And then at the end, I think I'll teach for 45, 50 minutes, and then we do some question and answer, and then we do a meditation to put really into practice what we were talking about. Is that all right? I somehow have the feeling that you are experienced students. So if my level goes too fast or too high, I won't, but let me know, you know, if you don't get it, please let me know, because I would like everyone to really understand what we are talking about, and so that we can really put it into practice. Okay. So the motivation, it might be helpful just to close our eyes for a couple of minutes. And then to really bring our energy to our body, to the present moment. Letting go of all the thoughts that maybe are still wandering in the past, what you have been doing this morning in order to be here on time. And also letting go of all the thoughts that might already wander of what you're going to do after the session. You know, allow yourself a little bit of quality time just to be here and now, to be fully present, so that you can absorb the teachings to the best of your ability, which is really the best preparation for the future that is to come. And within the Mahayana, we always try to generate a motivation where we wish to achieve full enlightenment in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings. And what that means is that we wish to achieve our full potential for wisdom and compassion. And we do that because we know that once we achieve that full potential, we experience no suffering at all. We only experience pure bliss. And not only that, but we also have the capacity to help each and every sentient being that we can see is suffering. Suffering from their delusions, suffering from their beliefs, suffering from not understanding the nature of reality. we recognize that all sentient beings are exactly the same as we were. And for the moment, we can say all sentient beings are the same as we are. We are all in the same boat, in the same ocean of samsara. And so wishing ourselves to develop our full potential also means wishing to develop the capacity so that we can help each and every sentient being to develop their full potential of wisdom and compassion. And so by listening to these teachings, by practicing these teachings, we wish that that may become a cause for developing our full wisdom and compassion, so that we can be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And then with that in mind, we can take refuge. And I'm sorry if I surprise you with that, but maybe you know the prayer by heart. It is in your book on page 5. And thank you for sharing. So we can read that together 3 times in English. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits, I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So we're going to talk today about the four foundations of mindfulness. And within this, we will highlight the aspect of impermanence. So first we will look a little bit in general. What are the 4 foundations of mindfulness referring to, and how does that practice fit within our path? And I don't know, did everyone already receive that reading material beforehand or not? Yeah, Sheila.
The readings were posted on the website for everybody to access, okay. And I just put the link in the chat for those that didn't see them.
Wonderful. So somebody already says I didn't have time to read. That's not a problem, but you have it. So I will sometimes go back to that, to the reading material, which was the sutra that this teaching is coming from. And it is actually quite nice to read the sutra because it makes the teachings alive and quite easily understandable. So the teachings are, how you say that? The Buddha taught the 4 foundations of mindfulness when he taught the Satipatthana Sutra. The Satipatthana Sutra is a very important discourse in the Pali canon, and it contains Buddha's instructions on establishing mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? Some people think, you know, when we practice mindfulness, we just bring the mind in the present moment. We bring the mind in the present moment and we are aware of the present moment. But little children, they are in the present moment, right? Animals, their mind is in the present moment. But do they practice mindfulness? Maybe not. They are mindful, but do they practice mindfulness? So then Buddha would say, no, that is not the mindfulness that I'm teaching. Mindfulness that I'm teaching is not just being present in the moment, but it is also remembering. It is in the Mahayana Buddhist teachings, for instance, in the Abhidharma, we say mindfulness is that which does not forget its object. Mindfulness is a quality of mind, or we call it a mental factor that remembers its object, that recollects the knowledge that it has about the object. So remembering is not just remembering, oh, this is my hand and this is my arm and this is my breathing, but it is also, for instance, remembering the impermanence of everything. Remembering the impermanence seems to be quite simple because, well, everything is impermanent. So why would I need to remember that? But if we look into how our mind works, right? Our mind actually forgets all the time that things are impermanent by nature. Somehow we hold on to a nature of things that is much more permanent than that it exists in actuality. And I will explain that later more deeply. So mindfulness is a mental factor. Mindfulness is a quality of mind, and it has to do with remembering. And so we can be mindful of our body. We can remember all the parts of our body. We can also remember the impermanent nature of our body. We can remember the impermanent nature of our experience. But we can also think about the teachings in the sense of what leads to suffering and what leads to liberation. And so when we engage in actions, we can remember these teachings. Oh, this action leads to suffering. And by remembering, by being mindful of our actions, we can maybe stop ourselves from engaging in actions that lead to suffering. And we can engage in actions that lead to liberation. We are mindful that our actions have an effect. And so we are mindful in how we apply ourselves in the actions. So the foundations of mindfulness, the foundations, when we talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, they refer to the objects that we use in order to practice mindfulness, which are our body, our feelings, our mind, and phenomena. So we will go into detail and then specifically into the impermanent nature of these 4 foundations a little bit later. So the Satipatthana Sutra is, according to many scholars and practitioners, a direct path to liberation. So when you practice the Satipatthana Sutra, it leads to liberation from samsara. You just follow the instructions from the sutra and you will realize nirvana. Some people even believe that that is the only thing you need to do. You practice mindfulness and you're going to be liberated. While others say, well, it is actually a very short path to liberation or an easy path to liberation. While others say, well, you need to add a little bit of practice to the sutra in order to really, for it to really become a course for liberation. And then we come into the whole discussion of what do we need to realize in order to be liberated from samsara? And I will not go into the details of that because then we go into the whole tenet systems. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the Satipatthana Sutra in the sense how the Prasangika school would talk about it. What we need to realize in order to be liberated from samsara according to the Prasangika school. So then that is clear that when we interpret the sutra a little bit, it becomes a course for liberation, for sure. So in general, we know that this kind of practice is mainly practiced by Hinayana schools or by the Theravada Buddhism. But it is also practiced within the Mahayana tradition. We don't find it so easily there, but it is definitely described, and many Mahayana teachers have given commentaries on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And I don't know if that is just a difference of terminology, but what I find in the Mahayana scriptures, it talks about the 4 close placements of mindfulness. While within the Theravada tradition, it talks about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. It talks about exactly the same thing, you know, just a little bit different terms. So if you want to look up more information, for instance, I did a Google search on the 4 close placements of mindfulness. You can find several texts that give you quite extensively a commentary on that. But that's your homework. So we have the Satipatthana Sutra, which is a Hinayana Sutra, but then there is also the Mahasatipatthana Sutra, which followed after that. And that is a great discourse on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that is more practiced by the Mahayana practitioners. The difference is very small, you know, but the main difference is that when we start observing phenomena, that section is much more extensive in the Mahasatipatthana Sutra than in the Satipatthana Sutra. If I say it in terms that we know, is that the Bodhisattva, when he starts to realize emptiness, he realizes emptiness with many more reasonings than the Hinayana practitioner, than the, for instance, the hearer and the solitary realizer. The Bodhisattva also realizes much more extensive the emptiness of, or the selflessness of phenomena. He doesn't just realize the selflessness of phenomena related to his own body, but he also realizes the selflessness of phenomena in relationship to the body of others, but also in relation to many other phenomena. You know, and the Hinayana practitioner mainly realizes the selflessness of phenomena in relation to his own body. So how do we fit this practice within the Mahayana path? Where do we find it? So I learned about the 4 foundations of mindfulness within the Mahayana text from the Abhisamaya Alamkara, or the ornament of clear realization. And so we studied that in the master's program. It is the first text that when you start at the beginning that you study. And then specifically in the 4th chapter, there is an explanation on there it is translated as the 4 close placements of mindfulness. And so within the FPMT, when we studied the basic program, and I'm not sure what study you do at, you do any of that, Sheila, here at Shantideva? No. Anyway, people can find it on the FPMT website if they want to go into in-depth study. If you go to the basic program, there is one of the topics is the 4th chapter of the ornament of clear realization. And so in that 4th chapter is an explanation on the 4 close placements of mindfulness, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So within that 4th chapter, it speaks about the aspects that somebody needs to develop in order to become a Buddha. It talks about 173 aspects of the mind of a Buddha. And of these 173 aspects, the Buddha shares 37 aspects with the hearers and the solitary realizers. And the first 4 of these are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So there we can find it back. We can go to that text and then we can see how is that explained within the Mahayana tradition. And so I spoke in the beginning about what mindfulness is, that mindfulness is not forgetting the object, and that it is not just simply being present, but it is remembering. And it is more than just remembering the object, it is also remembering qualities of the object. And so within the ornament of clear realization, it says that it is the 4 close placements of mindfulness, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is not just mindfulness, but it is also wisdom. And some say it is more wisdom than mindfulness. It is wisdom because with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we investigate. We investigate specific and general characteristics of the 4 phenomena. And Sheila, could you put up that screen sharing what I give you? Just that you have some kind of visual. Yes, so here are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The foundations that we're going to investigate are the body, the feelings, the mind, and phenomena. So the body is very clear, is what we have here with us, that place, that palace that we are living in. The body also entails the breath, right? Being mindful of breathing. Then the feelings is very important to observe, because the feelings is very often that is the cause of our craving. And because the feeling is the cause of craving, it is very strongly related to the true sufferings, the cause of suffering. And we observe the mind and we observe phenomena. Phenomena is everything else except the body, the feelings, and the mind. And then we can go one further, Sheila, because there we can see what we observe, what we investigate. When we focus on the body and we focus on the specific characteristics of the body, then we focus on the fact that the body is not clean. And we do that in order to counteract the mind that believes that the body is pure. We observe the specific characteristics of the feelings, which is that feelings are suffering. We believe that feelings are happiness. So in order to counteract that conception, that idea, we meditate on the fact that feelings are suffering. We meditate on the mind being impermanent. And when we say it and we think about that intellectually, it might be quite logical, right? Of course, the mind is impermanent. But the way we behave, or the way we often perceive it, it is as if the mind is permanent. Either the self we experience as being permanent, or even mental states we can experience as being permanent. And then the specific characteristics of phenomena is that all phenomena are selfless. Selfless means here the emptiness of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. And so then we can also investigate the general characteristics of phenomena, which are impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness, I think. No selflessness, emptiness. Yes. So this is one type of division. When you start looking into the text, there are different types of division. For instance, there are places where it says the general characteristics are impermanence, suffering, emptiness, selflessness, and also the emptiness of true existence, or the emptiness of inherent existence. Some people say actually impermanence, suffering, empty and selfless, they are specific characteristics, and just the emptiness of true existence is a general characteristic. And so when we hear that, we can think, you know, we can just investigate all these four objects, and we can apply all the general characteristics that are named. We can apply all the specific characteristics that are named, and we can't go wrong. You know, we can learn the nature of reality from all these four objects. And so that means, yeah, we can put it down. Thank you. So the purpose of engaging in the four foundations of mindfulness is to meditate on the aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So first we need to study the Four Noble Truths. We need to study the aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And once we have understood them, we can meditate upon them. And so for that, we use the four foundations of mindfulness. So when we place our mindfulness on the body, we will engage in true suffering. Because once we have understood that the body is in the nature of pervasive compounded suffering, do you know what that is? Once we know that the body is in that nature, we will generate the wish to be free of that. Do we know what the pervasive compounded suffering is? So you want me to explain? So in general, we have three types. Suffering is divided into several divisions in the Lamrim. We have the 6 types of suffering, we have the 8 types of suffering, but we also have the 3 types of suffering. And the 3 types of suffering is the suffering of suffering, which relates to all the unpleasant experiences that we have. We all want to be free of that, right? We actually emotionally react with an aversion when that kind of suffering arises in the mind. True? There is no one who says, I like the pain, I like the suffering of pain. Nobody says that. We all want to be free from that. Even animals want to be free of that. Right? When we kick a dog, they run away, normally. I have a dog here, he doesn't. But normally when a dog experiences pain, they run away. Right? We do that too. But that is only the most coarse form of suffering. The second form of the 3 types of suffering, or the second division, is the suffering of change. And the suffering of change refers to all the pleasant experiences that we have. So the Buddha says all our pleasant experiences are in the nature of suffering. And then some people says, yeah, because later it changes into suffering, which is true, you know. So that is one of the reasons why pleasant experiences are in the nature of suffering. It is because they're not stable and they cannot last. They will always change into suffering. Some people say if pleasant experiences were really happiness, then the more we have of them, the more happy we would become, which we know is not true, right? For instance, if I'm very hungry and I start eating, the first bites, they are fantastic, right? Wow, so much pleasure I experience. And I feel like, wow, this is real happiness. But then I take another bite and another bite and another bite. And at a certain point, my stomach becomes full. But I was so hungry, and so I keep eating and I keep eating. And at a certain point, I feel like, oh, now I have so much pain in my stomach, right? So then we see that what gives us pleasure is not really in the nature of happiness. It is in the nature of suffering. If eating would be really in the nature of happiness, then the more we eat, the more happy we would become. Which is not true, right? So therefore we say that is the second form of, or the more subtle level of suffering, the second form of suffering, the suffering of change. And then we have a more subtle level of suffering, which is called the all-pervasive suffering, or the all-pervasive compounded suffering, or the conditioned suffering, or the suffering of conditioned existence, it is called. So that refers to the fact that we have a body that is produced from karma and delusions. And that body, that body experiences in every moment feelings. And in dependence on these feelings, we produce delusions. We react with attachment or aversion. So we have a body that is constantly producing delusions, that is constantly producing the causes for suffering. And we have no control over that. It happens automatically. Pleasure arises in the mind, immediately attachment follows. Aversion arises in the mind, unpleasant feelings arise in the mind, immediately aversion follows. Both attachment and aversion are causes for suffering. So we are sitting here in this body, which is actually producing causes for suffering again and again and again, causes for samsara again and again. That is what is called the all-pervasive compounded suffering. So we need to understand that level of suffering in order to become free of samsara. Moving away from the suffering of suffering, even animals can do that. Moving away from the suffering of change, also non-Buddhists do that by generating higher and higher levels of concentration, more subtle states of meditation where we bliss out all the time, and eventually move away from even the pleasant feelings, which is the happiness of, which is the suffering of change. We move away from that. So even non-Buddhists do that. Very specific for Buddhists is that we say we need to remove the all-pervasive compounded suffering in order to be totally free from samsara. So to know how to do that, to know what we need to remove, we need to know exactly what suffering we are talking about. We need to recognize that suffering. And so we do that by placing our mindfulness on the body. Then the second object that we use is our feelings. And by placing our mindfulness on the feelings, we engage with true origins. Why is that? When we place our mind on feelings, feelings is the cause where we are craving. And craving is the true origin. Right? Craving for more happiness, craving for freedom from unhappiness is the cause for suffering. So that is the second noble truth, right? True origin. So when we place our mind on the mind itself, then we engage in true cessation, which is the third noble truth. Because what we do is we realize at a certain point that there is no self, right? And when we use these practices of mindfulness, what we do is we say we have these 5 aggregates. And so we meditate on these 5 aggregates. We meditate on the body, on the feeling, on discrimination, on compositional factors, which is all other qualities of the mind. And then we meditate on consciousness itself. And by doing that, we also investigate whether we can find the self in any of these aggregates. And we find that there is no self. And so then we might somehow get a little bit scared, like, oh my gosh, there is no self. You know, that means that once I'm going to die, then I'm not going to exist anymore. And so when we meditate on the mind, when we are mindful of every moment of mind arising and then dissolving and arising and dissolving, and we know that the mind continues after life, then we know that the self will never be severed. We will never be severed because the mind keeps existing, whether we have a body or we don't have a body. And so that means that we feel that we are confident in engaging in true cessations. There are people who believe that if I realize the lack of a self, then the moment that I die, I will not come back anymore. Right? And so this is one. There are schools of thought that really believe this. The moment I realize selflessness, then the moment I die, I cease to exist completely. So then some people are scared to realize selflessness because they're hanging on to existence. So then when we contemplate, but the mind is impermanent and the mind changes moment to moment. And there is no beginning to the mind and there is no end to the mind. Then we get the confidence that even when I realize selflessness, I will not sever my continuum once I die. You understand that? In the Mahayana Buddhism, we do not have this belief, you know, we never believe that the self is going to be severed after we die. So when we place our mind on the mindfulness of phenomena, which is the fourth foundation of mindfulness, then we engage in true path, which is the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth is that we need to understand which phenomena, which actions lead to suffering and which lead to the abandonment of suffering. And so they are categorized under phenomena. So why do we need to meditate? Oh my gosh, it's already quarter. Time goes so quick. I'm going to say a little bit more. Is that all right? So why is meditating on impermanence so important? You know, if we look at the workings of the mind, automatically, intuitively, we hold on to permanence. We do not realize the impermanent of things, the impermanent nature of things. As soon as we start thinking about it, yes. But as soon as we react automatically, which is emotionally, we believe in permanence. We believe that things do not change. For instance, we meet a friend on the street and we haven't seen this friend for 10 years. And we say, oh my gosh, you haven't changed at all. Right? What do we mean with that? Has the person not changed? Yes, the person has changed, of course. And you know that the person has changed, but something in that person, you recognize it. And so therefore you say, you haven't changed. I still recognize you as the same person as you were before. Not 100% the same, but still the same. Right? So that sameness that we are seeing, that is our grasping at permanence. When I see a cup, my cup or my glass or whatever, I see an object. Today, that object looks exactly the same as it looked yesterday. And as it looked the moment I bought it. Or maybe there are some scratches on it, but still it's the same. We do not see the impermanence of a cup, which means we do not see that the cup before it was a cup, when it still was clay, maybe in the river somewhere, and where it was put out by someone, taken out by someone, changed into a cup, bake it in the oven, and make it ready to be sold. What we see as cup is what we buy in the shop or what somebody gives us as a present. That is the cup. We do not see what is before the cup. So that impermanence of the cup we don't see. We also don't see the end of the cup, where the cup transforms into something else. Right? Sometimes when we have something very precious and it breaks, it falls on the ground and it breaks, we say, oh, how is that possible? It's broken. It's broken. How is that possible? But the brokenness was already there, right? It is part of the nature of that object. It's just that we don't remember. We forget. And so when we remember the impermanence of things, we remember where it's coming from and we remember where it is going. Then when something breaks, we're not surprised. We are like, okay, today is the day that I have to say bye-bye. Right? I was waiting for this, or I expected this to happen. And when we expect it to happen, the hurt that we are feeling, which comes about due to unrealistic expectations, that hurt will not be so big. Right? We can easily say, okay, bye-bye. So knowing the impermanence helps us to let go. Knowing impermanence means that we do not fight against what life is offering us. Change can happen at any moment, right? Lama Zopa says we do not know what is going to happen in the next moment. Our house might burn down. Our partner might suddenly walk out and never come back. We might die in our sleep, never wake up. We do not know what is going to happen. So believing that tomorrow is going to be the same, believing that even in the next moment we are going to be the same, is not in accordance with reality, is it? But we believe it. And because we believe it, we expect it. And so then when things do not happen the way we expected, we get a shock and we feel hurt or disappointed or we suffer, right? So from holding on to permanence or holding on to things to be more permanent than they are in actuality, we create suffering for ourselves. Familiarizing the mind with impermanence helps to let go of unrealistic expectations. And with that helps us to experience less suffering. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool, good, good. I can talk much more about impermanence, but maybe I'll do next time a little bit more about how it comes that we have this grasping impermanence. I'll do that next time. I want to say today a little bit more about the mindfulness of the body, which is the first practice that we are doing when we practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So why do we choose the body? Why the body? The body is always with us. The body is always in the present moment. The body is never in the future. The body is never in the past. The body is always in the present moment. So where can we observe impermanence? When we connect with reality itself, which is in the present moment. When our mind is in the future or the mind is in the past, the mind forgets impermanence. Right? Because when we think about the past and the future, we do not think about the impermanent nature of the past and the future, right? We think about something has happened and it was like that. And every time we think about it, it is the same. And so we do not see the changes that are happening, and we do not see that where we are right now is not the past anymore. And where we are right now, things are constantly changing, which means that the past also already has changed. The mind that is in the past believes that that actually is still happening. The mind that is in the past is still trying to change the past. It goes over stories, you know. Oh, if I had said this, or if I had done that, then this would not have happened, and then I would still have this. And we create whole stories trying to change what already has happened. That mind is not really grounded in reality, is it? And we all do that, you know, don't beat yourself up. This is just the nature of the way the mind works. But the mind that is in the thinking, that is elaborating the conceptions, that is, we call it also mental engagement, which keeps engaging in something that already has happened or something that might happen. Somebody says, I do that very often. Me too. That's why we're here. That mind that is engaging in the conceptual mind is not connected with reality today, here and now. And so the beauty of bringing the mind to the present moment, bringing the mind to the body, is that that mind that engages in the past and in the future cannot arise, you know. And when it arises, we don't give it attention because we stay focused with the body. And when we don't give it attention, then also the delusions that arise in dependence upon thinking about the past and the future, they almost cannot arise, because instead of being in our thinking mind, fueling the disturbing emotions, we are just feeling like, what's going on right now? And so when we observe what is going on right now, delusions do not arise. Did you know that? That's one secret, I think, that we are never told. When the mind is in the present moment, delusions cannot arise. Delusions arise when we start running after something. Ooh, I would like that. That is not in the present moment. All delusions arise when I keep thinking about the past. That's not in the present moment. So when we want to calm the mind, we bring the mind to the body. We do a body scan, or we do observing the breath. And by bringing the mind back again and again and again, the mind calms down, right? We do know that. But the mind calms down because we are not fueling our disturbing emotions. Instead of being in our thinking mind, we go to our experiencing mind. And so in the sutra that I sent to you, the Satipatthana Sutra, there is beautifully explained how the meditator meditates on the body. For instance, and I read you one little thing and then the rest you can read yourself. In terms of mindfulness of breath, it says, for instance, and how does a practitioner remain established in the observation of the body in the body? So the Buddha says we need to observe the body in the body. The body, we have the body, seems to be one thing, isn't it? The body, one thing. But when we look into the body, we can distinguish so many different things. So we look for the body inside the body. We look for all the parts of the body inside the body, all the aspects of the body inside the body. We don't look anywhere else except inside the body. So how does the practitioner remain established in the observation of the body in the body? She goes to the forest, to the root, to the foot of a tree or to an empty room, sits down cross-legged in the lotus position, holds her body straight and establishes mindfulness in front of her. She breathes in, aware that she's breathing in. She breathes out, aware that she's breathing out. When she breathes in a long breath, she knows, I'm breathing in a long breath. And when she breathes out a long breath, she knows, I'm breathing out a long breath. And so it continues. Oh, thank you so much. So we see it in the chat. When she breathes in a short breath, she knows, I'm breathing a short breath. When she breathes out a short breath, she knows, I'm breathing out a short breath. So what that tells us that we just observe what is going on. We don't judge it. We don't try to change it. We don't think anything about it, but we observe it. And by seeing that we breathe in and then we breathe out, we can see the impermanence of each and every breath. We can focus on the beginning of the in-breath. We can focus on the middle, and we can focus at the end. And we can do the same with the out-breath. We can focus on the fact that once we have done one breathing in and breathing out, that breath never comes back. That breath is very unique. It is impermanent by nature. It comes into existence and it fades out of existence. That same breath will never come back. Only in that moment. It is here and then it goes. And when we can observe that without holding on to, letting go, we let go each and every breath. We observe the impermanence of the breathing. Right? And so we can observe then the whole body in terms of we can observe our posture, the body is walking. The body is sitting. The body is laying down. The body is standing, so these are the 4 postures that the Buddha taught meditation to meditate in. But then there's so many other movements that we are making with the body. And so each and every movement we can be mindful of. We can be mindful of the uncleanliness of the body, of the uncleanliness, how you say that, of the body. We have this image of the body that the body is quite beautiful, right? Especially if there's a beautiful person, we think, wow, fantastic. But, and I won't go too much into detail, but once, His Holiness, he said, what's the body? It's just a bag of filth. And people were like, what? And he said, just think what the body is producing. No matter how beautiful the food is that you put in, Just see what the body produces from it. Is that when it comes out, nobody wants to have it. Right? If we think about what comes out of all these openings in the body, the ears, the nose, the mouth. If I have a beautiful piece of chocolate and I put it in my mouth, nobody wants to have it anymore, right? But still, when we see the body, the outside of the body, the skin of the body, we believe the body is clean, the body is beautiful. We can also imagine the body, that we take the skin off. Suddenly the body becomes very different. We do not want to be close anymore to a body like that. And so thinking about that will help us to change very deep-rooted conceptions that the body is permanent and that the body is clean. Why do we need to change these conceptions? Because these conceptions are not in accordance with reality. And everything that we believe in a way that it is not in accordance with reality will create suffering for us. Because in dependence upon these beliefs, we have irrealistic expectations. We have expectations about reality that reality can never, ever make true. It's just not possible. And so when it is not possible, but we believe it could happen, we are disappointed. But when we know the nature of the body, then we can expect that it is like that. When we're going to die, we can say, yeah, I expected that to happen. When my grand auntie was about to die, I think she was 84, she said to my mom, "Why me? Why do I have to die?" She had no idea, She thought about it, she talked about it, but deep inside, emotionally, no idea. And that's what we all do, right? It's not just my auntie. I do the same. And I'm sure many of you do the same too. It's in our nature, in our deluded nature. It is like that. Thanks God, thanks Buddha. Our deluded nature is not our true nature. Our deluded nature is not something that cannot be changed. Our deluded nature is just a habit of thinking. And we can change that thinking. We can change it by habituating ourselves to another way of thinking. And we can generate that habit by first listening to what is a more accurate way of thinking, accurate in the sense that what is a thinking that is more in accordance with reality. And then we listen, we hear about it, and then we study about it, we think about it, and we think, yeah, that's true, that's true. And once we really can see that it is true, we start familiarizing ourselves with that way of thinking. And then slowly, our old way of thinking, our deluded way of thinking will change into a thinking that is more in accordance with reality. When we can think more in terms of impermanence, do you think the mind will react easier to change? Or do you think the mind will become more rigid? Do you think we can go more with the flow of life? Or do you think we will create more upset with life? Right? You can, when we really can see the impermanent nature of things, we can go with the flow, isn't it? And then we become easier people. We have less resistance to change. And so then even things that when things happen that we don't like, we can easier say, okay, whatever. I'll go with it. Whatever. I'm not going to fight it. True. So we become easier for ourselves. We become easier for others. Then whatever happens in life is not going to touch us so deeply. We can walk easier through all the problems that life throws at us. True. And so then in the Satipatthana Sutra, what Buddha also does, which I thought was a bit confronting, but I thought it's maybe nice to meditate upon later today, after we do a few questions. He advises the meditator to meditate on the body after death. And then how the body decays and how it breaks down, and I thought, wow, that's a very powerful meditation. We do meditate on death, but we think about death, that death is going to come, and we don't know for sure when it's going to come. And that very, very simple things can cause death, and even things that normally keep us alive can cause our death. But we don't really meditate on the dead body, right? We do meditate on that we are about to die, but not when the body is gone, and then we visualize all the decay. But for me, it was like, whoa. So I thought, let's try that and see what it does to us. So I have a meditation for us on the impermanence of the body and how we can go through the different levels of impermanence using the body. And I'm not going to be exhaustive. We can do many more things on impermanence, but it is just as an example for you to do. And I know that there are lineages, where they meditate every day on impermanence. I'm not so strong in that, to tell you the truth. I'm sure Lama Zopa would do that too every day, remembering death. And he does do that, actually, remembering death. But even impermanence, that the good fortune that we have at the moment, even if we are still alive tomorrow, we might actually lose conditions that are so useful today to practice. These conditions that we have, they are not permanent. All right, I've been rambling on for an hour. Does anyone have any questions? Shall I read the question? And then Abelardo has his hand raised. He might maybe just say the question. I work and study in education. In this field, many researchers study metacognition. Please, could you help me to distinguish between metacognition? What is metacognition? Can you explain that to me? I've never heard about that. Is metacognition seen as a function of the mind, and is the mind seen as something different from the brain? Could you answer that? Yeah. Awareness of one's thought. So what is the relationship between awareness of one's thought and mindfulness? So mindfulness can be awareness of the body, of feelings, of phenomena, of the mind, right? So I think mindfulness is bigger than just awareness of one thought. Awareness of one's thought is that mindfulness. do you mean that when you are observing your own thoughts, or it is awareness of one thought process and understanding of the patterns behind them? I mean, there is some mindfulness needed for that. And when you talk about understanding the patterns behind them, you need some wisdom too. And when you're really going to look at the patterns behind thought processes, then you're going to go towards the all-pervasive suffering, you know, the suffering of conditioned existence. So that's very interesting. So I think it is a mindfulness in the sense that you are focused on it and you try not to forget, you know, you're really observing and that not forgetting what you are looking at. But I don't think you use the metacognition to train the power of mindfulness. Is it? So mindfulness training is that you want to bring the mind to an object for a long period of time. You bring the mind back, you bring the mind back. Mindfulness is the capacity of the mind to hold the object. And so when we, for instance, trying to develop shamatha meditation or single-pointed concentration, we like to have the mind focus on one object for as long as we want. That is a training. So I don't think that with metacognition, you want to train that aspect, right? You want to use some kind of mindfulness in order to recognize and understand one's thought patterns. So you use some kind of mindfulness, but you don't do that to train the mindfulness. True? That's just my thought. Is that all right? Okay, otherwise you write more. And maybe we let Abelardo. Okay, great. Abelardo, ask the question.
Thank you, Venerable. I have two very brief questions. In the Mahayana Path, as I was taught, mindfulness is, as you just explained now, limited to single-pointed concentration. And this broader approach to mindfulness based on the Satipatthana Sutra is not hardly taught. So it confuses me a little bit within the Mahayana tradition, these two different approaches. It
confused me also. When I was preparing, you know, I went to the Theravada tradition and then I thought, oh, how do I fit this in the Mahayana? And I had to go back and forth many times in order to think, oh, it is like this, you know. So it can confuse when we go to other traditions and we are so trained in our own tradition. But you can find it in the Ornament of Clear Realization. It is explained as the 4 close placements of mindfulness. And it is actually needed for all bodhisattvas in order to train the mind in the 4 foundations of mindfulness or the 4 close placements of mindfulness. It is a training that we share with hearers and solitary realizers. But the bodhisattva trains these 4 aspects on the path of accumulation. Some say at the first part of the path of accumulation. Okay, but yeah. we use them, I think when it is, that is my observation, right? But I'm not sure if I can say it like that. When we use it in the Mahayana, we use it really in relation to the Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
Right, and so we use the mindfulness of the body in order to realize the all-pervasive suffering of having a body. And so in order to realize the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Sorry?
I didn't speak. someone else spoke.
Elle a réussi?
I don't understand. Say it again.
Ah,
I think you need to mute George.
j'aurais couru là-bas. Sois certain à la fin de son cours de lui demander si la deuxième personne est venue.
George, you need to mute. Oh, you know what?
You can mute him also.
Yes, I just muted him. I just realized that.
So when we think about the mindfulness of the body, we are engaging in true suffering. The first noble truth, life is suffering. The 5 aggregates are in the nature of suffering. What does it mean? They are in the nature of pervasive compounded suffering. How do we observe that? We observe that by observing the body, how the body is produced from karma and delusions, how the body constantly produces karma and delusions, how we are under the influence of karma and delusions. This is how we realize the first noble truth within the Mahayana. In the Hinayana, it is explained a little bit different. You know, they don't speak so much about the Four Noble Truths, but they do, but they talk more about, you know, this is the practice of the mindfulness of the body. You do this, you observe this, you observe this, you observe this, without having the explanation of so deeply, that is what I perceive, about the true suffering and the true origin of suffering and the true cessation of suffering and the true path.
So my second question then is, if one is following the guidance of the Lam Rim, where would this approach to mindfulness come in?
Yeah, in the Lam Rim, you only find it in the, what I remember from in the section of calm abiding. Right there, we practice mindfulness as part of the development of calm abiding. That's it.
Yeah, it's a more restricted view of mindfulness. It's the more limited approach to mindfulness.
Well, it's somehow we don't talk about it so much. You know, when I was studying the master's program, there were, you know, Alan Wallace, he came and he was teaching his how does he call that? He's teaching this shamatha, right? Where you meditate for 24 minutes and you bring the mind to your breath and to the body. And so there was a group of students who said, oh, let's do that 3 times a week. We sit together and we practice this. And so the Geshe, he heard about it. And he said, he almost every class, he was saying, why are you doing this? What's the purpose of that? You know, he said, you better study. Why would you just sit and focus on your body? What's that? So he didn't see any use in doing that. My own experience is, having done the study, the more you understand the mind, the more you contemplate on the mind, due to the knowledge that you gather and the strength of the knowledge, and maybe it's a little bit wisdom, somehow the delusions cannot arise that quickly. And then the mindfulness becomes automatically stronger, right? So then there is not such a need to bring the mind back. So sometimes I think in the Mahayana, it almost seems that mindfulness is more a result that comes on the side of doing the study, doing the meditations, and it is not something that you practice separately, right? But on the path of accumulation, it is described that the first 4 aspects that the Bodhisattva engages in is the 4 close placements of mindfulness.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. I'm sorry if it's not, I mean, I feel, you know, we have never made it really to a practice of the Mahayana, but it is a practice of the Mahayana. We cannot say we don't have to do it, but I do think that we have a kind of a very different approach to that practice than it is in the Hinayana traditions or the Theravada traditions. If I see Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he is mindful of every action he is doing. right? And he is so mindful. I don't know if you have ever seen him. When you are very mindful, you can move very, very fast, you know. And I don't know if you have ever seen Lama Zopa running around the relics, you know. I think there's a video on Facebook of that. He runs so fast, you know, his attendant is trying to catch up and he can't. And Lama Zopa is there with his after his stroke, he still goes faster than this young monk that is his attendant, right? But I think that is his mindfulness. He's so present. Then there is no resistance to change. So then we can move very fast. So the practice is there, but just a little bit different. I hope that helps, Abelardo.
Yes, so it's helped me very much. I have been recently learning about the Satipatthana Sutra. The teachings of Bhikkhu Analayo has written a lot about this. And I know in the Theravada tradition, as you said at the beginning, it is considered a complete path to liberation. But the bodhicitta element of Mahayana is absent there. So
yes,
yeah, that's
yes. But there's nothing that can stop us from adding that.
exactly. That's how I'm trying to resolve this. But I do recognize the merits of, and I've benefited very much from mindfulness practice myself.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So if you set a bodhicitta motivation when you start, it becomes a Mahayana practice.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. So
Thank
we
you.
can get around it also. Yes. Oh, let me have a look. How can we surrender? How can surrendering to the situation come into play with impermanence? I think, I don't know, I would say the other way around. When we know impermanence, it helps us to surrender to the situation. Accepting impermanence means that we also accept that it is as it is. So when there is a difficult situation, we know that even if we would fight it, we cannot change that situation. The situation is as it is. But when we accept it as it is, we also don't resist the impermanence, which will help to change the situation, which will make the situation change. So I think the more we are in impermanence, observing impermanence, you know. For instance, when a problem arises, a problem is impermanent. A problem is coming together from many causes and conditions, which are impermanent by nature. So the problem itself is impermanent. If we can see that, then you would have to say that that problem will naturally resolve one day once the causes and conditions are finished. What we do is there is a problem and I'm going to fight with the problem because I want to solve the problem. And often we prolong the problem because we are contributing to the problem. But when we back off and say, okay, there was a problem, but I'm not going to worry about it, the problem can take its own course and it will naturally dissolve. Sometimes we do need to take action, you know, but sometimes we don't. Right? When I started to understand that, I thought, oh, I'm just not going to go there. And then I saw that things naturally resolve and I don't have to make it my issue. I don't have to put in effort and frustration and to make things change. Things change naturally. Right? Does that help? Okay, so then the next one is, how can we relate to right mindfulness from the Noble Eightfold Path to the 4 foundations of mindfulness? So when we have, so I said that the 4 foundations of mindfulness are the first 4 aspects that the Bodhisattva trains on the Mahayana path of accumulation. And so these 4 aspects a bodhisattva has in common or are shared with the hearers and the solitary realizers, or with the Hinayana practitioners. The bodhisattva doesn't have just 4 aspects, they have 37 aspects. The 37 limbs to enlightenment, the 37 aspects of enlightenment, they are shared with the hearer and the solitary realizer practitioner. And so the last 8 of them is the Eightfold Noble Path. And one aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path is mindfulness. So some people say that when you train the 4 foundations of mindfulness, you are actually training the mindfulness of the Noble Eightfold Path. I don't know exactly how it is. I think mindfulness is a quality of the mind that we can strengthen when we practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Mindfulness is also a quality that we practice on several occasions on the path. You know, so even within these 37 practices of enlightenment, I think there is another place where I think in the 5 powers or the 5, there is another mindfulness there. What is the difference? I have no clue. You know, maybe one is stronger than the other. They're definitely related. But the 4 foundations of mindfulness is the basis of the Eightfold Noble Path. Then one more question. Oh, there's 6 messages. You know what we do? I'm going to ask Sheila to send me these questions, and then I'll make sure that tomorrow I will answer them in the teachings. And then we have today still some time. Do we still have some time to do the meditation?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Are you dead on time?
We end at noon.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so then I'll leave that question for tomorrow, if that's okay. Oh, you exactly leave on noon. Okay.
I suppose we can go over a little if you prefer, if everyone wants to stay.
How do people feel about that?
Show of hands for staying.
So you're going to record anyway, isn't it? So if people need to leave, they can leave, right? It's no problem. And if they feel they want to listen to the recordings, they listen to the recordings. And I will try to make the meditation a little bit short. Is that all right? Could we do it like that?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. All right. So tomorrow I'm going to talk about the 3 other foundations of mindfulness, the feelings, the mind, and phenomena, and then especially in relation to impermanence, how we can contemplate and how we can practice on them. So today there was a little bit, you know, to put it into the place of the Mahayana practice and how we can do that. And I hope that was a little bit clear. So then to meditate. Just take a few minutes to change the mind from listening and thinking to being present in the body. And so you can meditate right where you're sitting right now. Make sure that your posture is comfortable. And if you can, you know, depending on where you are sitting, you can make sure that your back is straight. But even if you sit comfortably on the couch, you know, that is good enough for me now. But if you can, you straighten up your back. You relax your shoulders. And you close your eyes, allowing a little bit of light to come in. Let go of whatever you have heard. Let go of any thinking that you are doing on the teachings. Just be present in the body. And reflect on how your body has been changing over the years. You came to this planet in this form as a little baby. Try to visualize yourself that small. And then envision yourself growing up. Becoming a toddler, a little child, a teenager. How you were, how your body looked like, how your body behaved in your 20s, your 30s, and then slowly moving up to today. And watch yourself going through these changes from a distance as an observer with no emotional engagement. And then go from the now into the future, imagining how your body will keep changing when you grow older. Visualize yourself at the end of your life. How your body has become more weak. Your ears and your eyes don't function so well anymore. And your skin has become wrinkled. Maybe you're walking with a stick or a rollator. Maybe you become so weak that you can't walk anymore. You are just in bed. And then reflect on the time that you won't be in this body anymore. And that time will definitely come one day. And although you are not in this body anymore, try to see how life continues. Your friends and family are still there. They're mourning their loss for some time. But then they pick up their lives again. Another aspect of impermanence is that whatever is impermanent changes moment to moment. And so we can look more closely in the body. And we can look at a more subtle level. For instance, we can look at our organs that are constantly working. We don't have to do anything for that. Our heart beats every second, pumping blood through the arteries. Our lungs are breathing in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide in every moment. The blood moves through the vascular system constantly, delivering oxygen and nutrition where needed, removing toxins and waste. And so focus on that movement that happens moment to moment. That is a change that is happening moment to moment. And that momentary change happens on the deepest level, on the cellular level, where in every moment cells are dying and cells are renewed. And in each and every cell, there is so much activity going on, taking in nutrients, eliminating toxins. We can't even see a cell with our bare eyes. But from having looked through a microscope, we know that on that level, so much change is happening in every moment. And then we can also think about the impermanence of the body by visualizing what happens after we have passed away. So from the moment that we pass away and the consciousness has left the body, a process of disintegration starts to happen. The body starts to smell, gets bloated, it turns blue in color. And these are all signs of a decay that has begun. And then think, my body is in that nature. I will end up like that. And there is no way that I can avoid that state. And once the body is buried, it will get infested with maggots and worms. Visualize that that happens. And then think, this body of mine is in that same nature. It will end up in the same way, and there is no way I can avoid that state. And then visualize that the body is half eaten by the maggots and the worms. It has become just a skeleton with a little flesh and blood sticking to it. And the bones are held together by the ligaments. And then think that this body of mine will also become like that. My flesh will be gone, rotten away and eaten. The skeleton is still there, maybe smeared with a little bit of blood, and the bones are held together by the ligaments. But then soon after that, even the ligaments will be rotten, and the skeleton just becomes a collection of bones. And then with time, these bones will dry up more and more, and they become gray. And eventually they start to fall into dust. And then think that this body of mine is of the same nature. It will end up in the same way. And there is no way I can avoid that state. So then observe what meditating in this way, how it affects your mind. And then in dependence on that, you can bring the meditation to a conclusion. And then we can end the meditation by dedicating all the positive energy to all beings, intently wishing that they find happiness and well-being. And we can do, at the end of this session, we can do together a short dedication prayer from the prayer book. Due to these virtues, due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Due to the merits of the 3 times collected by me, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and all other sentient beings which are totally non-existent from their own side, may the I, which is also totally non-existent from its own side, achieve Guru Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment, which is also totally non-existent from its own side. I lead all sentient beings who are totally non-existent from their own side to that enlightenment, which is totally non-existent from its own side, by myself alone, who is also non-existent from its own side. A famous Lama Zopa dedication prayer. Tomorrow we maybe talk a little bit more about emptiness and how we can apply that to the foundations of mindfulness. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so sorry that I went a bit over time.